The goal is to establish the proper approach angle, airspeed, power setting, and configuration by the time the pilot reaches a target altitude, say 500 or 1,000 feet above the airport elevation, so the airplane flies itself to the runway. If you're not in final configuration on airspeed and altitude, you're not ready to land. Although the approach speeds of light aircraft can vary by as much as 50 knots, the optimal approach path of all is virtually identical, about 3 degrees pitch down for a normal landing, slightly steeper on a short or obstructed field. That's why the approach path, as defined by a VASI or ILS, is the same for all aircraft. The speed changes, but the approach angle stays the same. Flying a stabilized approach assures you'll stay on the proper glide path and reach the runway at the right airspeed. What is key is recognizing the proper glide path. Visualizing the proper glide path can be difficult because topography can play visual tricks. If the runway sits up on a raised parcel of land, the correct approach angle is apt to look high from the cockpit. You should have a target on the runway, a spot you're aiming for as your landing point. If you're on target, the spot won't move up or down in the windshield. It will just get bigger. Even in the absence of wind, up and down drafts can affect your flight path. The topography, ground cover, and weather can all influence the stability of the air. On a sunny day, up and down drafts will be created by uneven heating of the air, as heat is reflected back or absorbed by the earth. And any air movement, if it encounters rising or falling terrain, will also lead to instability of the air. Here's where the art of flying, of reading the conditions and manipulating the controls accordingly, comes into play. One of the oldest debates in aviation is whether pitch or power controls airspeed and which controls vertical speed. The reality is, when you're flying an approach, if you want to maintain the proper glide path and constant speed in anything but smooth air, you're going to have to work both the throttle and the elevator, and inputs on one will affect the response of the other. Discuss this with your instructor and ask for a demonstration. Always be ready to go around. Plan on it. That will keep you flexible and your options open. But be ready to deal with the demands of a go-around. This is not a risk-free maneuver. For example, adding full power when you have full flaps and nose-high trim set can create impressive pitch-up attitudes that can result in a stall. In fact, the go-around ranks number 6 in landing accident causes. That's why elevator trim stalls are now required as part of the private pilot flight test. As you start your flare, look down the runway. Put the top of the cowl above the end of the runway and hold it there. That will keep you adding more and more back pressure, and the plane will land itself. Remember the nose-up attitude you established on takeoff? That's exactly the same attitude the aircraft should be in when landing. Don't release back pressure after ground contact. Hold the yoke back to keep the attitude as nose-high as possible on rollout, using the airframe itself for aerodynamic braking. And after exiting the runway, pull all the way over the hold lines, dash past the dashed lines. Then contact ground control and complete the after-landing checklist. Okay, we've seen the basics of how to handle normal takeoffs and landings. Now, I want to show you some examples of landings our cameras captured at a recent fly-in. The conditions that day required normal piloting technique, but some of the landings you'll see are anything but normal. Let's rate them from 1 to 10, 10 being superior. I'll be using my official landometer calibration system, which is a completely subjective measuring tool I carry around in my head. Why don't you rate these performances too? And we'll see how our scores match up.
No one can accuse this pilot of being too hot on final. Kaboom! Okay, he's gonna try it again. There, that's better. The first landing would have been great on an aircraft carrier, but here on land, I've got to give that a 3.9. This Cessna looks like the pilot's got everything under control. Yep. Now the flare. He's got a bit of a float. Make that a lot of float. This is what happens with excessive airspeed. Now, here he comes, but he's still not done. Yes, the landing was good, but he used up too much of the runway to get to his touchdown point. That rate's a 6.0 in my book. This Cessna 150 is a little hot. Holding the nose off. Very nice. Yeah, it would have earned an 8, but we're going to have to deduct a point for excessive airspeed. Oh, and look at this. The pilot's retracting the flaps on the runway. Not the safest way to fly.
We should concentrate on the rollout and avoid configuration changes until clear of the runway. Otherwise, there's the possibility of losing control or, in a retractable gear airplane, raising the gear instead of the flap. We're going to have to deduct something for that, too. I'll give it a 6. Okay, this Piper is set up for a good landing. Good airspeed and attitude, but a little burble on final can mess up a nice approach. You've got to be ready for that. Nice recovery. I'll give it an even 7. Here's a beautiful landing. Compliments of a beach bonanza. Good attitude, directional control, and good for a hefty 9.7 on the landometer. This Cessna 150 pilot's not sure what to do with the elevator. He pulls it back, pushes it forward, pulls it back, pushes it forward. Okay, he finally has it in the right attitude and is smart enough to keep it there, keeping the nose wheel off the runway. On balance, that rates a big 7 in my book. This 182 appears set up nicely, but wait, the pilot lets the nose drop. Ouch! We hope he didn't do that on purpose, but he's sure giving his oleo strut a workout. And the local A&P might get some work out of this too. Can you say potential prop strike? That's a 2.0 arrival in my book. Here it is from the reverse angle. Look how nicely the plane's set up and how quickly it all goes south. Ouch! That's what happens when you don't maintain the proper landing attitude. This Saratoga pilot has everything under control. Good airspeed, good attitude, just a little bit off the center line after touchdown. And that's good for a solid 8.5 on the landometer.